Good afternoon, everybody out there in Irish Breakdown land. My name is Vince D'Addario. It says it right there. I am the football analyst here at irishbreakdown.com. That guy right there is Brian Driscoll. He is the publisher. It says it right there.
You don't got to get all snotty about the name tags, okay?
Just right there. It says it right there.
Okay.
But no, it is Tuesday. It is another stacking up day. We are going to talk the Notre Dame defense versus the Oklahoma State offense, and it's going to be fun to talk about, frankly. But before we do, we generally have house cleaning items to touch on,
to discuss.
Some news,
from
yes,
yesterday.
some news and notes, and some things that you were hinting at in the last podcast,
right.
But it didn't really become public or official a couple hours after we signed off. So I will give the floor to you, Mr. Driscoll, about the change in personnel on game day.
Yeah, so found out late last week, I think like maybe Friday, I got a text from a friend of mine saying that Josh Lugg had gotten injured and that Blake Fisher was going to start in the bowl game. And so obviously I reached out to the folks at Notre Dame, which is kind of how I like to handle injuries. I don't think you just run with injury news. You need to get confirmation, and there's just a right and a wrong way to go about it. And they asked that we hold off until Monday night to report that Josh was hurt. Now we did, if you remember the message board, you do know that we put up something this weekend saying that Blake Fisher was going to play a lot more than expected, and didn't say why, and this is why,
right?
Because Josh Lugg was hurt. So Josh, my understanding is Josh has, I believe, already had the surgery to repair his knee. It's been something he's been battling really all year, that and a back issue, which is partly factors into why at times Josh really kind of struggled with some of the more speed rushers, because he was hampered, which has kind of unfortunately been the problem with Josh the last couple of years. He's really had a hard time staying healthy.
He's been battling a lot of injuries. Yeah.
And it's a reason why I think, I've been told Notre Dame is strongly considering bringing him back for sixth year, which I think would, I feel like that's not really good for either side of this thing at this point in time. So that's it. So Blake Fisher steps into the starting lineup at right tackle. Notre Dame will have a pair of true freshmen on the offensive line, and we'll get into what that means for Notre Dame as we get into this matchup. Good timing for the matchup. But no, actually, we did that yesterday, so I guess we probably should address it. I think it's an interesting thing, Vince, because when I look at it, obviously you're losing some experience. We don't know how healthy Blake Fisher is going to be. Mm-hmm. We don't know if Blake Fisher is going to be able to give you, 70 reps of full strength football. I think it kind of reminds me a little bit of like a bowl game, to be a spring game, to be completely honest with you. You get your 15 practices, and what's his stamina going to be like? What's his, is he going to be in the fourth quarter? Is he going to be good to go? And then you kind of get into it and say, okay, well then kind of what is he going to do? You need to get somebody else ready to kind of maybe take every third or fourth series, Michael Carmody or Tosh Baker. I think that's something the staff has to consider. The other concern I have is that, Blake Fisher began spring. See, I told you, it feels like a spring game. He began the bowl practices playing left tackle. Well, now he's switching to right tackle. It's not as simple as just you move to right tackle. Everything you did before is backwards now.
Yeah, your stance is different.
Everything is reversed. Your eye discipline is different. You're used to looking here to here. Now you're here to here. Everything's different, and it's for freshmen. So those are all concerns that I have. If Blake is able to kind of handle all that, in some ways, it's going to sound weird to say, but in some ways, this could, if Blake is healthy and Blake is able to pick up, make the adjustment pretty quickly, this is something that ultimately I think could be a positive for Notre Dame, because you're facing a team that's got really good edge rushers.
Yeah.
And Josh Lugg has frankly struggled with good edge rushers this season. Blake Fisher is just a freshman. Joe Walt's been their best tackle pass blocker all year.
No question.
And Blake Fisher is a guy that has a ton of potential. So
would have started at left tackle as a true freshman.
That's going to be.
So now you've got bookend true freshmen in your bowl game, which obviously is a peek into the future. Granted, right? But they're not looking at it that way. They're still putting their best two tackles as of December 28th.
Right.
They're putting their best two tackles on the field. They're trying to win this game. It's not well, they might be starting next year, so let's go ahead and start
Right.
those guys. That's not the thought process
Right.
here.
That's not why they're doing this. This is their two best tackles. And
I think that's an important point to hit, right? I mean, they want to win this game, and I love it. I mean, that's hey, 5 best play, right? And they're putting them on the field.
Right. And Blake proved during the spring and during fall camp that he was one of their 2 best tackles.
Right.
And then obviously, Joe proved that as the season went on.
Sure.
And so, like you said, Vince, they've proven that they're the 2 best guys.
No doubt.
For this job. And now the question is okay, what's their experience level? I mean, it's one thing for you to be talented. It's nothing for you to perform at a high level during a bowl game against
no question
a top 10 team and the most disruptive pass rush that in the country this year.
Right. And when I was there on Sunday, or a few Sundays ago now, right? They were doing some individual drills, and they had Blake working as a left tackle, and he was working combo blocks with tight ends. Well, he will still be working combo blocks, but the tight end's on the other side now. It's a completely different feel to things when you move from the left side to the right side. So they had no intention of putting him at right tackle when they started bowl prep. It only probably manifested itself after Josh got hurt, right?
Well,
so
part of that too is I don't
tough.
think they were anticipating Blake being full go for the bowl game, period. Blake has consistently throughout his time at Notre Dame proven to be ahead of schedule in a lot of different ways. And Marcus Freeman said this, we didn't go into practices thinking we were even going to have Blake Fisher, much less have him ready to start. Here's a concern I have is, the first question is, okay, is he fully healthy? I can assure you that there's no way Notre Dame's playing Blake Fisher, nor would Blake Fisher's parents allow him to play if he wasn't healthy.
Absolutely.
That's the one thing. This is a bowl game that has no championship implications. Yes, you want to win the game, but Notre Dame's not playing their star tackle if he's injured, right?
Absolutely.
Now, could he get hurt again? Yeah. My concern is not so much is he healthy. It's he's 330 plus pounds, and he's coming off of a knee injury. Sure. That's always a concern for me. And but you get through this game, hopefully get through this game with him being healthy and coming out of it healthy, and you'll be in a better place. But if he's healthy, I do think Notre Dame is better positioned to handle the pass rush now than they were before.
Because they just got more athletic on the edge.
Right.
And as much as I love Josh Lugg, I do. I've been a proponent of Josh Lugg always,
He's
right,
from the
beginning.
Kid. He really is.
Exactly. And he has fought so hard through injuries that I've been a big proponent.
Because we're not getting Josh Lugg at full speed. That's the reality of it all year.
That's exactly
He's never,
right.
And we've said this. Now we know, right? We're not saying that like we knew it all along, because Marcus Freeman hinted. Now, you and I knew that he had some upper body issues. We did not know
some
that he was playing
stuff.
with a partially torn knee that he'd been playing with all year.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a kid with some guts. The reality is, however, he's never looked like the kid he was 2 years ago in 2019 when he got his first starts. He's never looked like that guy the last 2 years. Well, now we know why. He's been this is something that was already injured. Now it just got worse.
Yeah.
So huge kudos to Josh Lugg for being toughing 100%. That through and never making excuses, not having his parents leak to the media, not him leaking to the media, not a coach leaking to the media. Oh, he's really been injured. So, the point is that hindered his ability to handle speed rushes off the edge.
And they just got more athletic by having Blake Fisher in there. I mean, those are just facts, right? And so going up against the speed that Oklahoma State brings on the edge, now you've got 2 athletic guys on the outside that can potentially slow those guys down.
Right.
I mean,
now, do they have the advanced technique? There's questions there, right? Athletically, they're going to be good. Now, technically, skill-wise, assignment-wise, will they be on point? That's a whole different question.
Absolutely. And remember, Blake Fisher, he may be the best lineman, that Notre Dame has had in X amount of years or whatever. And that's fine. That's your opinion, and that's a valid opinion. He's played one half of football.
Talented. There's a difference between being talented and being the best.
Exactly.
He's just a freshman. He's going to make some mistakes, right?
He's played one half of football at the collegiate level, even though he was tabbed as the starter at left tackle, which is huge as a true freshman.
Mm-hmm.
He's played one half of football. So there's going to be some growing pains. It's going to happen, right?
Yep.
And, and he's playing next to someone that he's never played next to before either. And so that's going to be
right.
a learning experience
The
as
good
well.
news is
getting
that
used to
guy's
that.
like that kid. That guy's got. He's like 25 years, 24, 25 years
Well,
old. He's a 6-year
right.
senior.
He's a doctor.
That Kane will have the experience to kind of help bring, hopefully be able to bring him along. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's really going to be interesting. It's really going to be interesting.
Very fun to watch.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see him.
I was happy to see the depth chart finally get updated. That was nice. Ramon Henderson's not listed as a corner anymore.
Yeah.
He's now listed as a starting safety. We saw Jordan Patelho finally listed at the rover position. I was encouraged that they put Will Schweitzer at the Viper because they don't have to put a third guy there.
True.
Have been hearing some good things about how he's kind of coming along. I asked Coach Freeman about this yesterday about the young guys, and he talked about how Prince Colley's really coming along and Ryan Barnes. And I've been told Ryan Barnes has had a really good bowl session. He was listed as the number 2 corner behind Cam Hart, so that was good to see.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's gonna be really interesting to kind of see how this goes because again, they're gonna need those. It's a really tough spot to put those young bucks in. But I'll say this: one of the reasons I'm told from talking to now I've been told this by 2 really good sources that part of the reason Coach Easton is one of the several reasons Coach Easton wanted to come back was Joe Walt and Blake Fisher.
Absolutely,
it is that I want to work with those kids.
Me?
And so that part will be real interesting because I think we'll talk about this the offseason. I don't know how Blake Fisher's going to handle playing for Harry Easton. I hope well, but Harry's going to be completely different than anything Blake Fisher's ever dealt with, and if he can handle it, I mean. This is the best chance Blake Fisher now has to become a top 5 NFL draft pick.
Yes.
If he takes to Coach Easton's coaching and willingness to move around if need be, whether it be right tackle, left tackle, guard, wherever, he's got a chance now to be a top 10 pick and be a phenomenal player because
no question.
He's got all the talent in the world. I mean, to me, he's the second most talented offensive lineman Notre Dame's had the last decade. And the only guy ahead of him is probably the best offensive lineman in the NFL right now. And that's Quentin Nelson.
Right.
So you're going to get one of the best now to coach you up. If he takes the coaching well, it's going to be fun to watch. Vince, before we get into the breakdown of the Oklahoma State game, I did want to get to a couple of these super chats first, and we'll just kind of get this out of the way. We'll start with Benjamin Weiss.
Benjamin, thank you so much for the super chat. Reese is unchained. What sort of rookie mistakes might we see from him? Sorry, I know it's not exactly the topic of the show. Missed the live show for the offense. Hopefully a super chat makes up for it.
It does.
It always makes up for it, Benjamin. Come on, man. And we'll always answer your super chat. So I don't know that I would call him a rookie. He's just kind of a guy who doesn't necessarily have somebody looking over his shoulder anymore. Right. I mean, and so you might see a mistake or two, but I think that's to be expected.
Yeah, I think that I'm not necessarily worried about rookie mistakes because at the end of the day, those mistakes are going to more be the head coaches. Meaning, hey, look, here's what we want to do on 3rd down here. Here's what we want to do in 4th down here. We're in 2-down territory. That's ultimately going to be the head coach kind of making sure that the offensive coordinator knows what's expected. I don't think the things that you worry about, okay, is he going to, making sure that calls are getting in fast enough, making sure that the calls are being made early before the start of a drive so that because one thing that's driven me nuts about during Brian Kelly's tenure, and we've seen it now, is it takes so dang long to get a call in to start a drive. How many times have we seen Notre Dame call a timeout or be rushed to get a snap off on the first flip and play of a series? So you got to make sure that Coach Reese is, hey, look, let's get going. Let's go. We know the call. We know what we're running. Everybody get there. So we're going to find out, was that stuff being slowed up because Brian Kelly was trying to give his 2 cents, or was Brian Kelly the one trying to speed everybody up? I don't know. We're going to find that out.
Yes, we will.
It's going to be very, very interesting, Vince. That is for sure. But I think those are the type of things that we'll see. It won't be play calls because Brian Kelly wasn't dictating play calls to Tommy Reese in games. He was having a big say in what the game plan was going to look like.
Yes, in the during the week.
Right. Now, that I think it's going to be a little bit better, but we'll see. We'll have to find that out. We've got another super chat here from Lucas.
Lucas, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, I can easily see this game going a lot like the Wisconsin game. I think the plan should be to keep OSU's D on the field as much as possible. See, I did it. Oklahoma State's defense breaks in the second half. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I get it. I see where you're coming from.
I care about
Lucas.
scoring.
Yeah,
that's what I care about. If it takes you 3 plays or 13, just get points.
Get in the end zone, get points. And even if it's field goals, to be honest with you, points on every possession I think is super duper important. And I just said super duper like I'm a kindergarten teacher.
I'd be a little disappointed if this plays out like the Wisconsin game, because it tells us that the offense hasn't gotten any better.
Exactly, and that'll be the first thing that we talk about during the post game show is that the offense isn't where we thought it was.
Right.
And so I hope it does not play out like the Wisconsin game. I think Notre Dame can score, and they're going to need to.
So, because Notre Dame moved the ball okay on Wisconsin early. It was just mistakes, missed field goals. I want to see them be more aggressive. That's what I want. And again, we're talking, hopefully get to 24 to 30 points. We're not talking about coming out and dropping a 40 spot on Oklahoma State. That would be pretty amazing. We're talking about just getting into the mid to late 20s, and I think that's where you want to be. But I do think that if you can keep the pressure on, to Lucas's point, if you can keep the pressure on Oklahoma State with tempo, with being aggressive, taking your shots, then I do think Notre Dame can kind of pull away late. But I don't know if I would care as much about keeping them on the field, because honestly, I don't because the Oklahoma State offense isn't one that I'm afraid of. So I don't care
not even a little
back
bit
on the field. That's just more opportunities for you to make stops and force turnovers.
Exactly.
It's get points. However you got to do it. If it's 2 plays, 12 plays, don't care. Just get points, and preferably touchdowns. That's going to be the key. Is for me. And one last super chat before we get this party started, Vince, and that is from, and we'll go ahead and get this one out of the way now.
Yeah, Matt says, did Book stiff the O-line at the buffet? I assume meaning that the O-line wasn't playing up to snuff and they just wanted Ian to get hurt last night.
Yeah.
I assume that's where that's
he's being
coming
sarcastic.
From. Yeah.
Did not happen.
That was not the case. They were doing the best that they could. So
I'll give my 2 cents, because I actually watched the game last night because I knew people were going to ask about it. And, I kind of feel like if you were a pro Ian Book person, you're going to say the offensive line sucked and he didn't have much of a chance. And you'd be absolutely right. And if you're someone who's anti-Ian Book, you're going to be like, we saw the same stuff from him last night that we saw in college.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also true. At the end of the day, for me, I don't think there's anything you can gain from last night's game.
No.
A, first career NFL start. B, they were down what did I hear during the broadcast? Like 20-some players?
22 they had on the COVID reserve list or the injured list or whatever the case may be. This 7th tackle, all these different
I'll tell you, the only thing that I think that they're going to take out of last night's game is, A, Ian Book still has issues reading defenses.
Mm-hmm.
Which, again, he's a rookie in the NFL. He was not going to go from what he was at Notre Dame to looking like Peyton Manning in his first start, right? There were several times he took sacks where he's got to get that ball out over top of the cover 2 corner, out to the sideline. Keep your eyes downfield. You got Kamara going deep. I mean, but those are all rookie mistakes, right? Those are things that are going to happen. But I'll tell you something he did last night. His teammates are going to look at him differently today than they did yesterday, because that kid took a beating. And he kept getting up, and he kept getting up, and he kept getting up without people helping him up. I mean, they're going to look at that and be like, "Man, we're sorry, but he didn't get. You didn't see Ian getting in people's faces. You didn't see him bitching at the linemen. He kept there's the one time you can see he had to kind of rock himself to get himself up. It's but I mean, I've been there, and you're just like, you know what, man." I'm just going to stay down here for a minute. But he didn't. He battled his butt off. And I think that's going to endear him to his teammates, that he just, I mean, they're going to be like, look, man, you got to throw the ball, right? They're going to get on him. But the way he battled last night, and that's part of the reason so many people in Notre Dame love him.
That was going to be my point. Is if you were on Twitter last night, and there were a lot of people, obviously,
I was not, for that very reason. I had a feeling last night was going to be
it was a little crazy.
Same old crap from the last 3
some
years.
people. But all of his former teammates obviously had his back, and there's a reason for that, because that's the Ian Book that they saw all through college, right? It's a guy that's going to be a good leader. He's going to jump up. He's going to be there for his teammate. He's a good teammate. All of those different things. He showed that last night.
Sure.
No question. And I just want to say, you and I have never, ever said that he's not any one of those things.
Right.
Always.
You just said he can't read a defense, and he won't throw the ball downfield unless he has to.
And
look what happened last night. He took one shot past 20 yards. It was a great throw, back shoulder throw, went for 37 yards. It's like
which goes to the point that he can do it. Yes. Like he doesn't have a weak arm.
It's never been about that. No, I think, and he did the same thing. It's like the first read wasn't there. He took off running, and instead of throwing the ball away, he takes 5-yard losses. It's the same stuff we saw at Notre Dame.
Right.
It's just about, the NFL guys are fast enough to catch you. But that's all part of the learning process.
He'll learn. Yeah,
that's exactly right. I mean, the kid made his first start. It's not like he was being groomed to start this game. He's starting this game because of flipping COVID rules that the NFL
was literally the fourth string quarterback.
Yeah. And he had to get up last night because they didn't really have anybody else.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big thing is, all the reading defenses, all that stuff. If he has it in him, he'll get there. He's got a great guy teaching him up, right? Sean Payton.
Yeah, absolutely.
What he did last night was he endeared himself to that organization, and the fans are going to boo and all that. And I don't know if they were booing him. I think they were booing the offensive line, to be honest with you.
I don't think they were booing Ian Book. I don't think
but they're going to, they'll say whatever they want. But the reality is his teammates and coaches are going to be like, you know what? Like this kid's a warrior.
Yeah.
Now we just got to go teach him how to read a defense. That's what it's going to be.
That's going to be the challenge. I mean, it just is. Yeah.
That's it. The other thing is you saw like Ian Book doesn't stop when he starts getting hit a ton. It doesn't cause him to like go in a shell. That's the other thing we saw last night. And that's
absolutely.
We've had issues with his ability to play in big games and make reads and things like that, but it's never been about he's afraid to get hit or nothing
or lay wood on somebody when he's running or slide. Like that's not really his thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like he's a warrior.
He's got to learn to be a better quarterback.
Yeah.
Leader never been a problem.
Right. Because
some of the never been a problem. Can you read a defense or not? That's always been Ian Book's question.
The ad-libbing that he I don't know. I don't want this to come off wrong. I want to say that he got away with in college. Right?
No, you can say it,
but
yeah, you can say
it's a fact, right? I mean, he wasn't playing NFL defenses, so some of the ad-libbing,
and he had way better players around him than were ever given the proper credit.
Yes,
in my
absolutely.
Opinion.
So
the ad always made to seem like he was carrying everybody else when in fact it was the other way around.
Yeah. Right.
But again, he's got that stuff won't work until he starts being more effective in the pocket. When he starts being more effective in the pocket, then that stuff will work.
Absolutely correct.
Exactly right. And then we got one more super chat before we dive into it. Patrick Bird, Oklahoma State's offense is, especially their quarterback, is turnover prone. Defense should get at least 2 INTs, if not 3. And I agree with you. And that's
a great
leads
segue
us right into it was a great segue.
Thanks, Patrick.
Right back into our breakdown of the Notre Dame defense.
Yes.
Against the Oklahoma State offense. And we're going to kick things off with the run game.
Okay. All right. So here we go. The run game for Notre Dame. It has steadily gotten better, obviously, in the second half of the season as I'm trying to find a nice way to say it, but as the offensive line got better, they started, as we said yesterday, we talked about this.
This is the defense. Notre Dame's defense.
Oh, I apologize.
Sorry, I did that earlier. I did the same thing earlier.
Wow. Okay. So let me.
Well, it's the same principle though. The defense started off rough.
They did.
Mean, you gave up 264 in the opener. Since you had one rough game against North Carolina since then, but overall, you've seen this run defense get really, really good.
Yes, absolutely, and they became. I put a lot of it on the fact that it was a new defense, and I didn't feel like they were super assignment sound early, and I also felt like they didn't tackle very well early. And I feel like that.
I think that was an issue really through the North Carolina. That didn't change till November, in my opinion.
Yeah,
tackling. Because you think of the North Carolina game was probably their worst tackling game of the season.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Right, absolutely.
I think tackling really for me was a concern a lot of the year events. I think the thing that impressed me was, I think they were embarrassed in that North Carolina game. I think the players and the coaches were embarrassed by that. And boy, they played at such a freakishly good level after that. I mean, they were just insane after that. I mean, just flying to the ball, physical. Yeah. And I think also at that point in time, they were that North Carolina game is they were getting used to playing without Kyle Hamilton.
That's a
I mean,
good
I think
point.
that's other part of it too. Is you had to throw some guys in there. How are you playing without Kyle? I mean, you got Ramon Henderson playing corner against North Carolina, and he did not play well. Well, then you move him to the secondary, safety, and he's playing a lot better football. So I think it was a team that was, like you said, I think the learning the defense and the tackling to me goes hand in hand. Because if you're not certain of where you're supposed to be, or you're a second late and those type of things, or you're still thinking about what your responsibilities are, those type of things, then you're going to not be as good tackling, in my opinion. And so I think all those things kind of go hand in hand. But honestly, I kind of felt like they started to show initial improvement during the Toledo game. And we talked about this. You take away that 67-yard run, which was a mistake, was a mistake that Coach Freeman made and admitted to his team that he made.
Which is huge.
Toledo didn't do a whole lot in that game either. And then you look at it and you look at what they did the next 3 games. They held Purdue to 57 yards rushing. They held Wisconsin to 78 yards rushing. I mean, Wisconsin was one of the better rushing teams in the country this year. I mean, Wisconsin finished 14th in the country this year in rushing at 215.4 yards per game. And they were at 4.9 yards per carry. Notre Dame held them to 78 yards and 2.8 yards per carry.
Yeah, I thought that was their best rushing defense all season. I mean, that's arguably their best defensive performance all season.
Right.
I mean,
and then Cincinnati averaged this year rushing averaged 180 yards per game this year rushing, and Notre Dame held them to 93.
Yeah.
So I mean, and they did a good job really shutting down opposition run games. And Navy had the third highest total of the season behind North Carolina and Florida State, and they went for 166, and that was like 80 yards below their season rushing average because they're a triple option team. So I think by the end of the year, especially, the run defense was really, really good. And the numbers, I think, finally started to reflect how good they were. Now, they finished 30th. I think they were one of the 25 best rush defenses by the end of the year. Still kind of hindered by the Florida State game, but you're not an elite rush defense yet, because an elite rush defense doesn't allow North Carolina to do what North Carolina did. But then you got to look at it and say, well, was that just one of those games? That's what you got to ask yourself, because everything before and after that was really good.
Right.
You just have to ask yourself, was that just one of those bad days that people have? And I mean, statistically, that's what it looks like. It's just an off day. It was your first game without your All-American safety.
Right.
You're
a blip
trying
on the radar kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. And so, and you're going up against an Oklahoma State rush offense that statistically has some good things about it, but I don't think is quite as strong as, as maybe its numbers look, in my opinion. And I think it's a good rushing team. They've got a dangerous quarterback, which is my concern. But you look at Oklahoma State, and you look at their last 5 games, they ran for 447 yards against TCU. The game before that, they went for 103 against West Virginia. And then the 3 games after, they went for 188 against Texas Tech, but they were 3.9 yards per carry. Then they went for 140 against Oklahoma, 3.9 yards per carry. And then they went for 66 and 1.7 yards per carry against Baylor. So they're not trending in the right direction with their run game. They've had a few games that were really good, but they've had some games that were really bad too. And so which version of the Oklahoma State rush offense are we going to get? That's the question. And so, that's kind of, yeah.
The only thing that worries me about the rush offense for Oklahoma State is the quarterback getting loose on non-designed run plays.
Right.
That, to be honest, when it's straight up run offense versus run defense, I like Notre Dame in this matchup, no question. I'm going to take Notre Dame all day long. I do. I like it, but it's the non-designed quarterback runs when he's scrambling, when he gets outside the pocket, things of that nature. That's what worries me about this particular matchup. I'm not saying it's going to be enough that they're going to take this game over, or they're going to do, but it might be enough.
It's enough to win it,
because
they don't have to score 40 to beat Notre Dame.
Exactly. Yes. Agreed.
The thing that I would say, Vince, is I'm actually going to disagree with you to a certain degree, because I do think they do some unique things run game wise that do make it a little bit of a challenge with Spencer Sanders. And what I mean by that is they'll do some RPOs with a draw built in, that concerns me a little bit because you get those linebackers out of the box, and all of a sudden he's a big kid. You know,
Sure.
he starts
Oh, yeah, he's
taking
a
off
bruiser.
against Notre Dame's undersized inside linebackers. You know, so he drops back and reads. Notre Dame's linebackers kind of take away the run. He'll just take off and run a draw, which is something North Carolina did with some success against Notre Dame. And then they also do they'll run traditional read zone. And if you get caught with a mistake one time, he's going to take that sucker out. He did that against Baylor in the first game. You know, they just made one backside mistake and he takes off and runs for 30 yards easy. That's the big concern for me. If it, like you said, if it just comes down to run game versus run game, I give advantage Notre Dame in a big way.
Yeah.
Oklahoma State has a really well coached offensive line. Really like what their offensive line, and I don't know who their offensive line coach is, but this is a really well coached group. This is not a super talented offensive line at all, but they work really well together, as we've discussed.
Yep.
Their timing in the zone game is really good.
Yep.
They do a decent job getting to the second level. When they struggle is when they just flat out get beat by better players. That's the thing is you have to either overwhelm them with numbers,
right,
which is something every offensive line is vulnerable with, because if you have 5, you can't block 7.
right.
And it's you know, being aggressive with those stunts. Well, then that leaves you vulnerable, obviously, to giving up other things. So how does Notre Dame handle that? Well, the way that Notre Dame has done it all year is they put a lot on their front four to win, and that's going to be the true of this game. Notre Dame's defensive line. Now, Oklahoma State's defensive line is going to get a lot of the attention. Number 1 in sacks, number 1 in tackles for loss, one of the best freshman defensive linemen in the country, et cetera, et cetera. And Malcolm Rodriguez, second-team All-American linebacker, right? Like the front 7 of Oklahoma, and especially the front 4, gets a lot of attention. Notre Dame's has been for whatever reason, Notre Dame's defensive line has been overlooked and underappreciated all year.
Oh my gosh. Oh my.
This is their chance to kind of.
There was a thing out there, and I don't even remember who it was that put it out, but Notre Dame was ranked like 35th in the nation or something with a defensive line. It was ridiculous. I can't even remember where it was. I just remember thinking, I'm not even going to respond to this. It was like on Twitter or something.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to respond to this because it's ridiculous, right? I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And they have been overlooked nationally.
Right.
And I think this is a great opportunity for them to really show some people what Notre Dame has on their front four. I really do. Because you're right. Notre Dame is going to put themselves in position to just rush 4 an awful lot. And they're going to have to disrupt what Oklahoma State wants to do in the backfield with 4 if they want to be successful. Now, of course, they're going to bring some stunts and they're going to bring some blitzes and they're going to overload. And of course they are. But if they want to have the success that we think that they can have against this offense, they're going to have to do it with 4, right? Or a 3 down with a 4th coming, right? But that's still with 4. So that still falls under the category of what we're talking about. They're going to have to. And I think, and we talked about it yesterday. Somebody asked the question about what position group on each side of the ball, you know, or has to play well or whatever. It's the front 4. I mean, it's the front of this defense. If they play well, I'm not saying it's game over, but it's pretty darn close.
It would require the Notre Dame offense to just flat out make a ton of mistakes.
Yeah, there you go.
Because if you control the line of scrimmage, then Oklahoma State's just not a team geared to really beat you. This current group, if they're not able to get their run game going. I don't think they want to put the game on Spencer Sanders' shoulders.
On his arm.
You know, I mean maybe he has the game of his life against Notre Dame, and that's certainly possible. But if it comes down to the games being put on his shoulders to kind of carry the offense, it's going to be hard for Notre Dame to lose this game. But that's much easier said than done because, like I said, every team they've played has had this mentality of make Spencer Sanders beat you with his arm. And guess what? Only 2 teams were able to actually make that happen.
Yeah, right.
You know, and one of those games required the opposing quarterback to complete like 80% of his passes. That was Brock Purdy. And then the other game, they were an inch away from winning and without their starting. I mean, look, if Jalen Warren's at running back on that play, I don't think he gets caught. I don't. I mean, it was their 3rd string running back, and he's kind of slow. So it's a good football team, and they're a physical football team.
Absolutely.
Notre Dame's have to be ready for that physicality. their backs are gonna run hard. Notre Dame has small linebackers. That's just a concern of mine.
Sure.
And so those are things I look at and say, boy, I just want to see. I just want to see how they play too. It's not
Sure.
just about the D line. Like the linebackers got to fit and they got to hit and they got to bring those running backs down. Because what you can't do is you can't have a bunch of potential 2-yard gains turn into 4-yard gains because you're constantly getting moved back by their physical running backs.
Right.
That's another concern that I have about this game, to be honest with you, Vince. So there's some things that make me concerned if Notre Dame doesn't bring their A game. But
Yeah.
I do believe, however, that if Notre Dame brings their A game on defense, that there's not as much that Oklahoma State's offense can do to them other than just hope they can catch some big plays in the pass game.
Sure.
But I don't know if that's where they want to live. And like they don't have a Michael Mayer. They don't have a Kevin Austin to turn to. But what they have is a lot of really good, solid receivers there to take pressure off the run game. What we don't know is, can this offense really roll when the pass game has to carry the day? That's kind of my bigger question, because when you look at this offense during the season, Vince, in the games where their run game didn't do a whole lot, they didn't score much. They scored 23 points against Southwest Missouri State. Now, their quarterbacks threw for 315 yards, but they only rushed for 54. They scored 23 points against an FCS opponent.
Yeah.
The next week against Tulsa, didn't run real well. They scored 28 points. Next week, they ran well, only scored 21 because they couldn't throw it. Scored 31 against Kansas State. That was the one game you could say maybe the pass game carried the day. They threw for 344. 107 against Iowa State. They only rushed for 107 yards against Iowa State, and they lost 21-24. Ran for 103 yards against West Virginia, only scored 24 points, won 24-3. You kind of see the pattern there, right? Like when their running game isn't going, they Texas, they scored 32 points, they ran for 220 yards, right? They convincingly beat Baylor in the first matchup. They ran for 219 yards. Right? In those games, they ran the ball well, and those are the games that they won. If Notre Dame can stop them from running the football, then it's going to be a lot harder for Oklahoma State to score the points to win. And honestly, you could say similar things about Notre Dame. I just feel like this Notre Dame team is more geared to beat you with the pass game than Oklahoma State is.
Sure. No, absolutely. I do worry a little bit about the size of the Notre Dame linebackers, but I think overall they've done a really good job this year of filling holes
because they've been allowed
downhill
to really play aggressively.
Yes.
Yeah.
And coming downhill and just reading and reacting. Right. And we didn't see a lot of that in the past.
Part of that's because how good the defensive line is.
Agreed.
Keep people occupied.
And which means what that means is, for people that don't understand what keeping people occupied is, they're not allowing that offensive line to get to the second level. And so the linebackers are able to scrape and get over the top and get into lanes and holes and fill them. And they'll be able to get there unmolested, which is huge as a linebacker.
Right.
I mean, you don't want to have to fight through and block, destruct, and all of those different things. When you can flow freely, you're really good. And again, if the front is playing the way we think the front can play, that's going to allow those linebackers to scrape and move freely and fill those holes. And so I think that's probably what's going to take place. And so in a run game capacity, I'm definitely giving the edge to Notre Dame. I like Notre Dame in this matchup. I like their front. I like their linebackers filling holes. Again, the only thing that worries me again is if the quarterback gets out on unscheduled runs, and that, right. But that's not necessarily
been an issue all year.
Exactly. And it's been an issue for Notre Dame defenses for a while now, to be honest. And so, but I don't really want to look at it that way. I want to look at it as their run game versus Notre Dame's run defense. It's advantage Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm. I think the thing too, Vince, when I look at this is, I think part of that is because Notre Dame's been more aggressive with their defensive line than they have been in the past. Inside. They turn those guys loose more. And I think by allowing them to be more aggressive and attack gaps, that is why you're seeing teams not being able to get to the second levels effectively. When those guys have been getting blocked, and that's something North Carolina did a really good job with. I'll give North Carolina credit. Their game plan was basically almost to let Notre Dame get penetration and then just have Sam Howell take off, and they were getting their offensive linemen up to the second level. It was like almost like kind of quarterback draws and stuff like that. I mean, that's what they were doing. And then just quarterback scrambles where they'd lose gap discipline, and he just kind of take off and run. Those are the things I think Notre Dame's got to limit. If they can limit those things, then I think they'll be successful. And then make it about, can Oklahoma State throw the football? And
right.
That's going to lead us to second part of our breakdown.
Boom. The Notre Dame pass defense versus the Oklahoma State pass offense. And if you're looking at these numbers for the first time, clearly the advantage goes to Notre Dame just based on the numbers, right?
I mean, the numbers that matter to me, yards per game don't matter, because yards per game are if you're beating teams convincingly, then they're going to throw for more yards.
100%.
Notre Dame ranks 27th in yards per attempt, 23rd in yards per completion. They've allowed the third fewest touchdowns. They've had the 10th most interceptions. They have the 12th best pass efficiency defense in the country, and they are 5th in the nation in sacks. I think those are the numbers to me.
Yeah.
It's a very disruptive defense, which is sacks plus interceptions.
Mm-hmm.
They get their hands on a lot of footballs and a lot of the big games this season, especially. Those have been big parts of what has allowed Notre Dame to be successful. And the other thing too is this is a pretty big improvement from where they were last year. Notre Dame took a bit of a step back last year in pass efficiency, and in 18 and 19, Notre Dame was excellent in pass efficiency defense. And in 18, they ranked 6th. They're at 105.6. Obviously, that was the year they had Alohi Gilman and Jalen Elliott safety. You had Julian Love and Troy Pride at corner. All 4 of those guys are in the NFL now, although Troy Pride is injured. And then 2019, you were 5th in the country at 110.15. Last year, they took a bit of a step back despite playing a bad schedule. That's the other thing, is they did not play a very good schedule last year, and ranked 34th in the country at 126.19. Then you lose Nick McLeod, you lose Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, you lose Dalen Hayes, you lose Adi Ogundiji, and then you lose Kyle Hamilton halfway through the year, and you make a big jump, and you're the number 12 pass efficiency defense in the country, despite playing a schedule that had several teams that were coming into the season you thought were going to be really good throwing the football. And I think those are things that this is a really good pass defense, has been a really good pass defense when they can limit the big plays. That's going to be the key in this game. Is I don't see Oklahoma State passing the ball on Notre Dame with consistency. The concern I have is twofold. Number one, third down, right? Because they have good route runners. Third down, and then number 2 is big plays, whether it be guys getting turned loose because you've got a new play calling operation, all those type of things, and then number 2 is just guys winning one-on-ones. Tay Martin's a guy, that Jaden Bray are 2 guys that concern me about winning those one-on-one matchups against a Clarence Lewis or Tariq Bracy, because they're the guys that are the bigger receivers that have kind of given Notre Dame some of those problems. And I think, to me, those are the question marks and concerns I have, Vince, is, are they going to be able to play at a high level in this game? That's a question mark, because if they can, then they'll shut the pass game down. I'm not worried about that at all.
Sure.
But they've got to go out and prove that. And that to me remains certainly a question mark.
Well, big plays are always a concern, especially when you're starting a guy who's getting his second career start in Ramon Henderson. And he is a long, rangy guy, no question. But, is he going to be peeking in the backfield? Could they get him, taking one misstep? A safety takes one step the wrong direction, he gets beat, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it just is what it is. It's not Kyle Hamilton and with makeup speed and long strides, et cetera. Mm-hmm. But, that's a genuine worry. That's a genuine concern that we have is big plays. And I personally believe the only way that Oklahoma State stays in this game offensively, they're going to have to hit some big plays. They're going to have to.
Or Notre Dame's offense turns the ball over. Those are the only
and gives them good field position.
But to your point, specifically just about this matchup,
right?
Notre Dame's defense against Oklahoma State's offense, it's big plays.
It has to be.
It really is. It's Notre Dame losing gap contain on an inside zone and the guy cutting back and running for 50 yards. It's
correct.
It's missing a tackle in space and an 8-yard catch turns into a 30-yard gain. It's Tate Martin or Jaden Bray getting over top of the defense and Spencer, because Spencer Sanders, the one thing, he's got a big arm.
He
I
does.
mean, he can throw the ball down the field now.
No doubt.
And if your technique isn't good, if they're able to kind of, when they've got Houston Griffith or DJ Brown at safety, some teams have been able to kind of isolate them in coverage and beat them with big plays. Can Oklahoma State figure out ways to do that and then also protect the quarterback? Because the only good thing on this whole thing, I mean, they rank 76th in yards per game, 80th in yards per attempt, and 80th in yards per completion, 104th in interceptions, 71st in completion percentage, 81st in pass efficiency. Those are all bad numbers. I mean, that's bottom half of the national rankings. And yet that number down at the bottom, sacks allowed, is the one that concerns me. I mean, it's twofold. Number one is they actually give up a decent amount of pressure, but it's when Spencer Sanders can make people miss and take off running, and that's where they move the chains. And at times they have been good at giving him time to throw. When they give him time to throw and he's not pressured and he's comfortable, he'll make plays in the pass game.
Sure.
He'll make big plays in the pass game. And that goes back to what you had said earlier, Vince, answering the question from yesterday. That's why the performance of the Notre Dame defensive line is so important.
Yes.
You cannot let Spencer Sanders get comfortable, because if he gets comfortable, he's going to beat you. If you can pressure him, and then when I mean pressure, I don't care about the number of sacks. Yeah, it's nice to have sacks because sacks are negative yards. But you could have 5 sacks, and if that's your only 5 or 6 good pass rushes the whole game, that quarterback's going to be pretty comfortable.
Right.
And it's got to be the consistent pressure, the consistency of getting on him where he's just getting harassed almost play after play. If you can do that, that's when Spencer Sanders will make mistakes. I mean, Vince, you'll see him, some of the interceptions he throws are just like, what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly.
That makes no sense why you tried that. Because I'll say this, we were talking about Ian Booker. Thing I'll say about Spencer Sanders, big arm, athletic, that is a tough kid and a confident kid, because he thinks he can make throws that he can't make. And he'll try to make throws with guys hitting him and clinging on him and all that. And you're like, hey, kudos for you being tough, but dude, take the freaking sack. You know what I mean? Like, because you throwing them the ball is not helping. And like, he'll throw third down picks. And I've always said this, Vince, third down interceptions when you're on your own midfield or you're backed up and you throw a bomb down the field, you just take a chance and they pick it off. That doesn't bother me. It's like a punt, as long as they don't run it back. Right. But he'll make them where he's like, they're at their own 40 and he'll throw a pick at like the other 45 and they're getting the ball at midfield.
Right.
Or they're running it back. I mean, it's bad picks. Right.
Not
every
interception
is necessarily bad. Oh, gosh.
I feel like, you know what I mean?
Oh,
like,
yes.
He's either making a spectacular play with his legs or his arm, or he's just throwing a befuddling interception. You're like,
in one series, you will watch him make a throw where you're like, wow, that was an NFL throw.
Right.
And then the next, like 2 plays later, he'll make a throw. You're like, how was that guy a starting quarterback in college?
Right.
In the same series. And that's got to be the maddening thing for Oklahoma State fans, because you're like, man, if we could get the first version of him where he can make these big throws and he can make plays with his legs, and like, boy, if we could just get that guy to show up more consistently,
yes,
boy, man, we got a chance to be really good. That's got to be how Oklahoma State fans think. It's just when he's bad, it's like, he'll have open guys and he just won't set his feet and he'll miss the guy by like 5 yards. I mean, he'll just throw like 5 feet over his head or 5 yards out in front of him. And you're like, how did you miss that guy? And then there's times where he'll like fit it between 3 dudes and you're like, oh my goodness, how did you make that throw?
Boom or bust.
It is.
I'm telling you.
It's got to be maddening.
And as a coach, you're just like,
right.
Like, you make these amazing throws and then you can't throw a hitch. Like,
right.
what has happened?
Right. And so the key for Notre Dame is going to be, don't let him get it comfortable to make those. Because here's the thing about quarterbacks like him. When they get into a groove, they are hard to stop. And they're hard to get out of that groove. It's like, if you allow him to get into that zone where he's comfortable and he's putting the ball where he wants it, it's going to be a long day for Notre Dame. Very long day for Notre Dame. You've got to know right away. You've got to let him know right away. I mean, honestly, I'd almost call a blitz on the first series, like just first
get him off his, hit him.
Yep. You know what I mean? Like, don't hit him dirty. I'm not talking about hitting him dirty, but just look, if he completes the ball and they gain 15, they gain 15. But you just let them know, like, hey, we're here. And
we're going to be here all afternoon.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, and again, when we say that, we're not talking about dirty hits, we're not talking about late hits, because we're not talking about penalties or trying to hurt a kid. It's just about being a quarterback. When the first 5-6 times you drop back, you get hit on like 4 or 5 of them.
Right.
You start looking for that, and not looking for it from a fear standpoint, but your clock speeds up. Like, hey, I got to get rid of this ball because
just asking Ian Book last night, right? I mean, it's the same situation. I'm not dogging Ian Book. I'm just saying because that's a relevant thing that a lot of people in the chat watched. They were flying at him, man, and he was like, he was ducking and he was trying to get out of the way. And if you can get a guy off his platform and you get him thinking about the rush, it's game over. I mean, that's right. What you want. You want him to be thinking about the rush, not thinking about his reads.
Because here's the thing about Notre Dame, and I wrote about this earlier in the week, is their sack numbers are great, and when their pass rush is on, it's really good.
Yeah.
But they aren't consistently a good pass rush, in my opinion. Like, you look at their numbers, like I'm trying to think. I think like they had, 40, according to Pro Football Focus, they had them down for, I think, like 45 sacks and 37 hits on the quarterback. Right, because they count sacks a little differently. It's kind of strange how they do it, but they had them down. I'm trying to find that article because I really want to give the specific numbers, but it was really eye popping. So Pro Football Focus had Notre Dame down for 45 sacks, and which was 5 more than they had in 2018, right? But they had them down for just 37 hits on the quarterback on top of those sacks. So that's like 82 total hits on the quarterback. Okay. Well, you look at the 2018 defensive line, they had only 40 sacks, which is 5 fewer, but they had 51 hits on the quarterback. That's over 90. Right. And you look at Oklahoma State, for example, who had arguably the best pass rush in the country. Pro Football Focus, if you take out the game against the FCS opponent, so that way you're looking at 12 games versus 12 games, right? They had 52 sacks and 50 hits on the quarterback. That's 102. That's 20 more. That's almost 2 more per game than Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. So that's the thing for me is, and the number of hurries per game was higher as well. You've got to be more consistent with the pass rush. And that's where I'm really curious how the game plan is going to be. What do we see from Isaiah Foskey? Do we see – because I read one of the dumbest things ever from Pro Football Focus the other day. And this is why I say, look, when it comes to the data collection, great stuff. When it comes to analysis and grades, it's really dumb stuff. And they were talking about Isaiah Foskey's sack numbers are misleading. And I'm like, because they said his overall pass rush grade was like a lower number. And I'm like, well, that's partly because A, your grading system is just dumb. And number 2, because he dropped into coverage 70 times. Whew, I'm glad I got that mute button on time.
Bless you.
I'm a loud sneezer, so I'm glad that would have scared some people. So the point is like your grading system is wrong, because when he rushes the quarterback, I mean, if anything, his pass rush numbers are skewed in the opposite direction. They're lower than they actually should be, because he doesn't rush as much. So those are the things I look at. Now, so like when you look at the pass rush, there's 2 guys to me. Number 1 is Isaiah Foskey. Do they turn him loose and let him rush quarterback, or do they do the thing where they're going to drop him into coverage a bunch? Against this team, who's a running first team, he needs to be playing at the line, or if they're going to move him around, which I'm fine with, we said this all year, make sure that wherever you line him up at linebacker, off ball, edge, wherever you do him, he's got to be coming hard at the snap. As long as they're doing that, then I'm good with them moving him around. They don't have to just put his hand on the ground on the outside. I like that versatility. And that's also kind of why I'm interested to see Mike Elston call plays in this game, because now you have the D-line coach as the guy calling the plays.
Right. It was the other guys, not Marcus Freeman, kind of putting the game plan together as well. And I don't know how much that changes things, because I'm sure he had input.
Sure.
But he's flat out said, he's like, I'm not there every day. Like, I'm doing other things. So, is it going to be a completely different defense? Of course not. You know what I mean? But there's going to be some nuances, and there's going to be some differences, I think, based on the people that put the game plan together, number 1, and the fact that Mike Elston is officially calling the plays. Now, Marcus Freeman's going to be involved. We were going to talk about this a little bit before, but you could see a little bit different. Maybe he wants to get his guys involved a little bit more. I mean, it's going to be interesting. That's for sure. I think that's going to be another fun nuance to kind of pay attention to in this game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be very intriguing to say the least. It's going to be very intriguing. There's no doubt about it.
You let these guys loose, I think they can have a really good
The other
game.
guy to me that's very important is Jason Adamiola. So if I were to tell you, according to Pro Football Focus, who had the most pressures on Notre Dame's defense, you might think your first guess might be Foskey. Jason Adamiola, according to Pro Football Focus, had 11 more total hurries than Foskey. Now, he rushed more. He rushed about 80 times more than Foskey, which, again, is a problem for me. Jason Adamiola should not be pass rushing 80 more times than Isaiah Foskey. But that's just the reality of it. And he had 12 hits on the quarterback this year. I mean, a third of his pass rushes ended with a hit on the quarterback, whether it be a sack or a hit. That's the other guy to me that has to have a big game. And that's I mean, because if you start getting pressure right up Spencer Sanders' face, that's where you start having problems. So I remember last year against Alabama, Jason Adamiola was sometimes you can overlook a individual performance because of the overall team performance. The team performance against Alabama was not good last year. But if you go watch Jason Adamiola last year, Bama couldn't block him.
Dude had a game.
Couldn't block him. And he's had moments like that this year where it's like they have no chance of blocking that guy. I'm hoping that they turn him loose in this game a little bit. And you kind of get into that danger zone of, do you want to turn him loose, but you also don't want him to have 4 sacks and go pro. You know what I mean? But
that's true.
But you got to do what you got to do to win. And to me, turning Isaiah Foskey and Jason Adamiola loose is the key to winning this game.
Yeah.
And if it means you lose them to the NFL, you lose them. Hopefully they'll make a wiser decision, because one game is not going to completely change the NFL's view of you. If you were a 5th-round pick coming into the game, you're not going to be a first-round pick because you had a big game.
Or maybe 4th. Yeah, right, exactly.
Right, but they're keys. I mean, when they are taking games over, you have no chance.
Exactly.
No chance. And Mike Ellison and the defensive staff need to turn him loose. Because look, so I'll give you a little nugget, a little inside scoop that I haven't even put on the message board, okay? I had been told for a while that Mike Ellison wasn't really in the conversation for defensive coordinator. Some sources have said that. I've actually been told by a couple sources lately that he is in the conversation for the defensive coordinator. It's not definitive that they're going to go outside the program. Mike Ellison has a little bit something to prove in this game too. If he wants to be the defensive coordinator, like, this is a game where it's like, hey, you go out there and have 7-8 sacks and shut down Oklahoma State's offense. You can walk into that office. That meme on Twitter of Vince McMahon doing like the pimp walk coming down the steps, right? Like, that's Mike Ellison walking to the office when they get back to Notre Dame if they shut out Oklahoma State, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, let's do this interview now, baby.
Yeah, right.
So he's got something to prove too.
That's funny.
I think defensively, this team kind of hit its stride late. I want to see if a month off slows that down, or if they're able to kind of really send this thing off. Because if Adamiola and Foskey come back next year, this will be a championship defense. There's no question about it. Now, will the other side of the ball catch up? We'll find out. But I truly believe, because I expect Cam Hart to come back. I believe with the young linebackers that are emerging, getting Maris Luafau back, Riley Mills, Aaronsberger, Cross, Lacey are all going to be a year older at those other edge spots.
Sure.
You bring in Tyson Ford and Aiden Gobera. You'll have Maris Luafau coming back. Bo Bauer comes back. Jack Kaiser comes back. You got the best freshman class of linebackers in the country coming back. You've got Prince Collie going into year 2. Ramon Henderson and Xavier Watts with a full year of safety under their belt. Cam Hart with a full year corner at his belt. The freshman corners, develop. Boy, this defense has a chance to be special next year if they come back. And this is the kind of game that can send them into the offseason with the confidence that they can be special if they handle their business, and it's going to start up front. But we're not quite done with this breakdown yet, Vince.
No, we're not, because you got to go.
We got to talk about the scoring, the Notre Dame scoring defense against the Oklahoma State scoring defense. And Vince, so yesterday I made the point.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I'm going to predict Notre Dame to win, and our prediction show will be later this week, is this right here.
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma State has a better defense than Notre Dame's offense, but
Yes.
it's not that far off. And that was sort of the point that I made yesterday, is the gap between those two units is greater when you look at the Notre Dame defense compared to the Oklahoma State offense.
Right.
And
Right.
here's the point I'm making. So when you look at scoring defense, for example, we talked about the pass defense, right? So we went. Let's go back to that just real quick. So you look at yards per attempt, it's 27th and 23rd for Notre Dame, 80th for Oklahoma State. Efficiency, 12th for Notre Dame, 81st for Oklahoma State. You look at Notre Dame's pass offense, Oklahoma State's 11th or 12th and 16th in yards per attempt and yards per completion, which is very good. Better than Notre Dame's. But Notre Dame's pass offense is 32nd
Which is
and 49th.
The gap is a lot closer.
Right. You look at pass efficiency. Oklahoma State's pass efficiency defense is 13th, one spot behind Notre Dame. Notre Dame's pass efficiency offense is 27th compared to 81st for Oklahoma State. And then you go to the total defense, right? These total defensive numbers, you look like scoring and those type of things. Yes, Notre Dame has the 9th ranked scoring defense. Oklahoma State has the 7th ranked scoring defense. The difference is Oklahoma State's offense ranks 50th. Notre Dame's offense ranks 20th.
Right.
Right? That's the difference.
Good.
Right. Yards per play. Oklahoma State has the fourth best defense in the country in yards per play. Notre Dame's offense ranks 43rd. Notre Dame ranks 28th in yards per play on defense. Oklahoma State's offense ranks 91st.
Right. One's a difference of 30-something. One's a difference of 60-something. Like,
right.
Again, the gap is closer.
And so those are the things I look at. And Notre Dame's offense is actually better when it comes to their ranking on turnovers lost than Oklahoma State's is on turnovers gained. That's a complete opposite here. And this is the other thing. Notre Dame ranks 16th in the country in turnovers forced. Oklahoma State's offense ranks 79th in turnovers lost. Notre Dame's offense ranks 37th in turnovers lost, while Oklahoma State's defense only ranks 50th in turnovers gained. Those are the numbers at the end of the day, to me, that are why I'm predicting Notre Dame. Even though I gave Oklahoma State the advantage in overall defense versus Notre Dame's offense, it's a smaller gap, and I could see Notre Dame's offense having success.
Sure.
If Oklahoma State's offense just comes out and works Notre Dame, which is anything's possible bowl game, I'd be shocked.
I'm going to be shocked if that happens. I mean, yes, I could see Notre Dame's offense having some success against Oklahoma State's defense. I'm not saying they're going to go out and score 45.
When we say success, we're talking like 27 to 30. Right.
I'm not saying they're going to score 45 points. Okay, yeah, like I said yesterday, if Notre Dame hits 30, I think it's it's a race to 30. Who gets to 30? That's who wins this game, right? But I also think that if Oklahoma State puts 30 on Notre Dame, I'm going to be just befuddled. Like, you will see a very confused look on my face when we start the post-game show.
Yes.
Because either there was a ton of turnovers and just unexpected big play like that, or Notre Dame just didn't show up. So I agree with you on that front. It's not a big surprise. I'm going to pick Notre Dame to win this game as well.
Which we'll, to give you that little preview, but we'll get to that.
I'm not going into specifics, but at the same time, it's because of what you just said.
Right.
I feel I have more confidence in the Notre Dame defense against the Oklahoma State offense than I do about the Oklahoma State defense against Notre Dame's offense.
Yeah. I agree. And that's why I go advantage Notre Dame in this particular matchup.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. No question.
Now, look, the thing is, Oklahoma State is good enough if Notre Dame makes mistakes, doesn't tackle well.
Sure.
Hurt them. Sure. They are. It would be a little surprising to see Notre Dame do that for a full game. Now, there'll be a play here, a play there. It's going to happen. I'm more looking at it from the standpoint of, is this going to be something that happens consistently enough for Oklahoma State to win the game? That's a different question. Yeah. And that's kind of what I'm looking at and what I'm considering when I look at this matchup. So that is it. That is our matchup, Vince. And I do think that we have some good comments and questions if you want to kind of just work through those real quick before we head out of here.
We have a couple super chats if you want to grab those first, Brian.
Yes. Let me just make sure where we left off. Here we go. We from Triple Deck. You're gonna love this one, Vince. This is a good
I
one.
do. I read this one when it came up. Triple Deck Pro, Triple Deck PO, PO. I love the context. You guys make my life easy and are amazing. Before IB, I had to do all the research for context myself. Real nerdy stuff that is greatly appreciated. Thank you. That's like in our mission statement. Like nerdy football is are us. Like that's that's who we want to be, and we're happy that you found us, Triple Deck, because that is who we are, and love having you on board, man. Appreciate it, and thank you very much for the super chat as well.
I like this one. Sorry, right behind it. Joseph Salvatore got an IB hat for Christmas. Woo! Love you guys. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Can I say that was kind of the oddest thing for me this Christmas?
What's that?
Is seeing pictures of people like opening up Irish Breakdown gear for Christmas and like being excited about it. That was like weird for me. Like it was awesome, but it was like I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
So I appreciate all of you that showed that stuff and told me about that stuff. That was really
that's cool.
Really cool because I wasn't expressing that. So
no, that's really cool.
Here's an interesting comment from Brandon. So
yeah, he says, I think Foskey initially had one foot out the door, praying he sees the big picture and the multiple benefits of coming back from a personal and team standpoint. I
don't necessarily agree with the first part. I do think he was focused on
the team, the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think every competitor, every guy that has a dream of being an NFL player knows like the opportunity that's in front of them.
It's got to be tough too when you can taste it, like it's right there, like
and everyone tells him how good he is and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, look, I mean, he made an impact from game one. So, and Brandon's not talking about how he didn't play good because of it. He's just saying, I think Brandon, I don't think that's not. I think once the season started, it's kind of like okay, you focus on the season,
sure,
and then you figure that stuff out in the offseason. And from what I'm told, Isaiah's been real quiet about what he's going to do. Nobody really knows because I don't think he necessarily knows. So, I mean, personally, I think he needs to come back. For his game needs growth. He look at the draft. It's loaded with edge players. Honestly, though, I'll say this. I think at the end of the day, the only way that kids should consider, and I'm probably going to have some people disagree with me on this. Once the season is over and you're looking at your NFL decision, the only way that you should allow what it does for the team to influence your decision is if you're genuinely torn. Like if you're generally torn one way or the other and you don't know what is best for you, then you look at, what, if I do come back though, not only can I get better, but my team has a chance to go win a title.
That's a good point.
I think if you're like, I want to go pro, I need to go. Because like, look, you don't think Notre Dame in 2018 would have benefited from having Quentin Nelson back?
Sure.
Of course they would have, but it wasn't good for Quentin Nelson to come back. So, you could go through a lot of different examples of the team would have been better off had he come back, but I don't know if he would have. So like Cole Kmet definitely would have benefited from coming back,
of course,
in 2020. But he was sitting there thinking like, my game is I had a good season. I had battled an injury. I don't want to deal with that again, but this is a really bad tight end class. I got a chance to be the first tight end taken. A year later, maybe that's a little bit of a different story. So you always have to do what's best for you once the season is over with. That's the difference. And the only time a team thing should factor in is if you're genuinely torn. Now, if Jason Adamiola and Isaiah Foskey are genuinely torn, then come back because both of their games have room for development.
Sure.
And they could be part of something special. And they kind of play off each other because they play right beside each other more often than not.
Oh, yeah.
Jason's the 3 technique, Isaiah's the Viper, and they are an under defense. So they play a lot into the boundary together. So they benefit each other. Both coming back benefits each other. Like Isaiah coming back could be good for Jason. Jason coming back could be good for Isaiah. I believe that. And then, now if Isaiah's back, you got Will Schweitzer emerging, Justin Adamiola. But now you could maybe move Justin Adamiola around more where he can play big end and some Viper and rush and all. Now, all of a sudden, you've got this really potentially dynamic group of defensive linemen coming back that makes them better. Like Aiden Hutchinson benefits from having David Ajabo on the other side, and David Ajabo benefits from having Aiden Hutchinson on the other side. They play off each other. And I think that's what Foskey and Adamiola could be next year if they both come back. And I think, honestly, they both should. Now, that's the other thing, too, is they have to look at the draft class as well. And the draft classes are going to, like, okay, yeah, you need to come back. Because next year's draft class, you're going to have a much better shot of,
Sure.
you know.
I think that's
Yeah.
a real, like, not real, but like that's a really important piece, I think, that a lot of people don't take into consideration.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Michael Johnson had an interesting. He says Deshaun Kaiser should have come back. Deshaun Kaiser should have come back for Deshaun Kaiser, but the Notre Dame team was better off without Deshaun Kaiser.
Yep.
I've heard people say this, like, man, if Deshaun would have come back in 2017, Notre Dame would have been so good. Nope, because he was not a good leader. He was not someone that the rest of the team would have played for. The only way Deshaun should have come back is if Deshaun would have come back humbled, and that's, I don't think, still has happened.
Right. Exactly.
And so. Yeah, if you could have, Michael, if you'd have told me that Deshaun's going to come back humbled with the right attitude, I'd say absolutely bring him back. But that wasn't necessarily the case.
All right. Another comment here from Brian. He says, our two deep is loaded with young talent. And I agree. It is loaded with young talent.
I want to bring this one up too. Jim Halloran says Notre Dame has never won a national championship without an All-American defensive end. Let me say this. Usually those two things go hand in hand. Meaning, if your team isn't national championship contender, your guys aren't going to get the recognition that they should be.
Sure.
If Notre Dame was 12-0 and a playoff team and Isaiah Foskey had the same numbers he had, people might look at Notre Dame differently and look at him differently. That's just the way that it goes.
Yep.
And that's kind of my thing is, like, I agree, but Notre Dame's also had some not very good teams with All-American defensive ends as well. Usually those things kind of go hand in hand, and they didn't necessarily win because they had an All-American end. The end was an All-American because he was already really good, but because they were good. It's like Alabama. If Alabama's a 3-loss team every year, they're not winning all these Heisman trophies. I mean, I'm sorry. Bryce Young's a hell of a player. He shouldn't have won the Heisman Trophy this year. I mean, that's the nature of the beast. I mean, that's just the way that college football is now. And maybe it's always been that way. I don't know, but it's definitely that way now. Absolutely is.
There's a couple questions in here about Botelho. I'm going to put up the first one, and then I'll find the second one as you're talking. But Brian says, how much will Botelho play? And then there was another one in here. I'm not exactly sure where it was, but it was more along the lines of, what does he bring to the table as a rover as opposed to being in the middle?
Well, I think how much he'll play is pretty much how much he played in November. I mean, you look at his snaps last five games of the year, 13, 23, 12, 19, and 19. I'd say probably around there, 19 to 25 reps. I think when it comes to him being a rover, it's about, he brings a really rangy guy that can tackle. And I think that's what they were looking for at rover. They weren't putting him there to cover people. They were putting him out there to tackle against offenses late in the year that like to do a lot of perimeter passes and perimeter screens and perimeter run game. And, that's kind of what he was doing. And they put him in the game a lot on first down and second down because those are heavier rundowns. And he hasn't played as much in coverage, but he showed range. He can cover the flats. I mean, he can do that because a lot of stuff they've asked him to do as a rover is similar to what they asked him to do as a Viper. Drop and cover the flats, get underneath the curl route. I mean, it's not the difference now is you got a lot more ground to cover to get to that curl route. And he showed himself to be a pretty athletic guy. Somebody asked about, benefit to moving him to Mike linebacker. And look, I've said this since they signed him. He can play middle linebacker, in my opinion. There's no doubt about it. And if Isaiah Foskey came back, I feel the same way about Jordan Botelho that I felt about Dalen Hayes. I would have loved to have seen Notre Dame move Dalen Hayes to middle linebacker. Vince, you know this. I said this for years. I'd love to see Dalen play middle linebacker. And I feel the same way about Jordan Botelho. The problem is you got to look at where can you best use him. If they think Bo Bauer's ready to be that middle linebacker, then I don't know if playing Jordan Botelho at Mike necessarily makes the most sense. If you're uncertain of what you have at Mike linebacker, then consider moving him. But the other thing too is who's your Vipers going to be, right? You got Foskey. What about after Foskey? You obviously have Justin Adamiola could step in there if there's an injury, but then you could say, well, but maybe Justin is better served in sort of a hybrid role where he's not a Viper all the time. There's so many different ways to look at this, and a lot of times that's what position moves really impact you. As much as I would have loved seeing Dalen Hayes at middle linebacker, that wouldn't have made sense last year because who's the Viper at that point in time? Foskey wasn't necessarily ready to be a full – I mean, those are the things you have to think about when you're talking about making those kind of moves. But if Notre Dame decided to put Jordan Patel at middle linebacker, they'd be fine because he's a big kid. But part of the reason we liked him so much at Viper, Vince, is because he's an explosive athlete. I mean, he is. He could certainly play – he was a linebacker in high school. And he was an athletic one. So I think he'd be fine there. It's just I don't know if that's necessarily where his future is best suited based on what the needs are in your football team.
Right.
But I think it's certainly if I'm whoever the linebackers coach is, I'm going to sit down and have a conversation with the rest of the staff. Say, hey, what are we doing at number 12? Because that kid can help you at Rover, clearly, not as a full-time guy, but in the role he has now. He can help you at Mike. He can help you at Viper. And figure out what's the best role for him. We got another super chat down here, Vince, from Joseph Papidi.
Yeah, thanks, Joseph, for the super chat. Really appreciate it. He goes, thank you guys so much. Still dealing with the vid. The vid, that's funny. And you guys are keeping me happy with Irish talk. Real quick, Irish D holds Oklahoma State to offense to under 20 points, and we win 27-17.
I can dig that.
I can dig that as well. I could very easily see that being the case. Absolutely. That's what, 44 total points? That's probably about where
what's the over? What's the over?
45.5.
45.5? Okay.
Yeah, 45.5.
And so. Jim just made a comment too. He mentioned that All-American. He goes, Brian, I agree. Whoever heard of Frank Stamms before his last year? Exactly. Wasn't he like a full? I'm trying to remember. It's before a little bit before my time to know this. I know he was a fullback early in his career. Was he a fullback? He played defense the year before too, right? Like he didn't just move to defense
so. I don't think he was just
last
in 1 year.
Right?
Yeah,
I know he played fullback early in his career.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's absolutely right. There's a lot of guys like that. I mean, certain guys when you're on a 5-7 team, and the next year you're 10-2, you're going to get a lot more recognition, even though you're the same exact player.
Yeah,
like Tyler Eifert's an example of that. Tyler Eifert was such a better player in 2011, like production-wise, than he was in 2012. But he got way more credit in 2012 because Notre Dame was really good. He was a first-team All-American. He won the Mackey Award in 2012, right? But if you look at Tyler's numbers, he was a way more productive player in 2011, way more. And I'm gonna show it here. In 2012, Tyler caught 50 passes for 685 yards and 4 touchdowns. That's 2012. He won the Mackey Award. The year before, as a junior, he had 63 catches for 803 yards and 5 touchdowns, and didn't get a sniff at any All-American honors.
Right?
Why? Notre Dame was 8-5.
Exactly.
And that's just the reality of it. It's, I mean. I don't think Michael Floyd got any sniffs of any All-American honors in 2011. He had 100 flipping catches. So, that's just the nature of it. When your team is good, your production is going to be given more credit than when it's not. So
I agree.
That's how it goes.
We got another super chat down there, and then I've got one up here to get to. Got one in the queue. Paul, thank you very much for the super chat. He says, happy holidays, guys. Happy holidays to you, Paul. BK was terrible at getting his squad ready for big games. How does Coach Freeman fix that? Safe travels. Thanks for a great year at IB. Go Irish.
Man, it was a great year too. It really
my gosh.
was.
It was, especially towards the end. But even without that, it was a great year.
We finished strong. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
How does he do it? It's about remembering that these are kids.
Exactly.
And that football's fun.
You can dial into it.
This is a business when you're away from the field. It's not a business when you're on the field.
Right.
It's a game when you're on the field. And that's what Marcus Freeman needs to bring back. It is a competitive game. And, will the stuff he's doing work? We don't know. We got to see him coach a game, right?
Absolutely.
But when I hear about them starting practice off with a competition, loser has to run. Players talking about how they're moving a lot more in practice, how it's more to me, football's supposed to be fun. Now, that doesn't mean it's not hard. That doesn't mean sometimes it's going to kick your butt, but it's still a game. You're supposed to have fun. It's like,
Absolutely.
you go back and watch the 88 and 89 and 90 Notre Dame teams, and everybody has this thought of, they're just such a hard physical. They talk so much trash back then. I mean, I remember a play. I think it was Scott Kolowski. I don't know how to say his name. I forgot. But there's a play where he hits a Miami guy in 90 and just gets up and he's like, and it's like the play wasn't necessarily over yet, but they talked a lot of trash. Those teams had fun playing football. And now there's a line you can cross. It's called Miami back then, but football is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be,
No doubt.
Getting up, celebrating, having fun, getting after it, talking trash the right way, and those type of things. And it's bringing that comes from competition. That competition breeds confidence. Confidence to me breeds success, and success breeds swagger. And that's how I think it builds on itself. But it's got to come down to competition that creates confidence. And I think, and just let these kids have fun, right?
Absolutely.
Make practices be fast, make them be up tempo, get after it, be competitive, and let kids know, look, I don't care if you're a 5th-year senior or a freshman, the best players are going to play. And so there gives those guys something to be locked in for. And I think all those things are part of what was often missing at Notre Dame under Brian Kelly is practices were very, Vince, you and I know this. How many times have you and I discussed, like, man, this is such we'd have to whisper so quietly at practice.
So other people couldn't hear what we were saying.
Because there was just no noise. Like
the players would be able to hear us.
That's what I was glad they finally turned the music on during practice, because I felt like I could actually, wasn't hearing myself breathe the entire time at practice, because it was so quiet. I like practices where it's it's coaching, it's flying around, it's guys being energetic, guys being pumped up, guys having fun. That's what I want to see. There's always teaching. That doesn't mean you can't be great teachers. It just means you create that kind of energy. And I think that's really ultimately, Paul, this is a great question. That's what Marcus Freeman needs to get back for, because when you have the competition on a daily basis, and that breeds confidence and that creates success, which then creates swagger, you go down to Miami knowing you're going to kick their butt, and then you go earn it, right? And Notre Dame didn't step on the field that day knowing they were going to kick Miami's butt. They stepped on the field like that day, like, it's just another. Remember this? I almost lost this, Vince. The one thing that Brian Kelly said more than any other that made me almost lose my absolute, what, is when he was talking about the Stanford game, and he said it's just another nameless, faceless opponent. And I just like that right there epitomizes I felt like the scene where, Era yells at Vince Vaughn's character, you just summed up your entire sorry-ass career in one sentence. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I felt about Brian Kelly when he said that, because this is an emotional game. And when you tamp that down, that's hurting your team. Like, it's about energy. And now you need to harness that energy and point it in the right direction. But it's about emotion and energy. And Brian Kelly's teams never had that. When they beat people, it's because they just had better players. Simple as that. They had better players and they had good coaches. That's why they won.
Yep.
And that's what it boils down to.
Chris Moss, very interesting.
Like,
Chris Moss, thank you for the super chat. Will players be allowed to wear the number 1 now that BK is out the door?
I hope so. That was so lame.
I don't really understand it, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't really understand the not having the number 1 thing. Like,
and if it was in reference to Greg Bryant, you should have said something about it. Some people have said, like,
I didn't think about that.
But that doesn't make sense, because I believe they had it the next year, and then, like, they lost a game. I think, remember, it was the year that they were they would give it to a different player each week.
Was that during BK's era?
I think that was 2016.
Oh, wow.
I think that was in 2016.
Worked out well.
And it was just like, it was such a dumb thing, and it didn't work. It was just like a gimmick that didn't work, and then they just got rid of it altogether, and it just was like,
just
dumb. So lame. There's no reason not to have number 1. Just none. So hopefully Marcus Freeman gets rid of that, and somebody will be allowed to wear number 1. Now, if you want to make number 1 like, hey, that's a number that we give a senior that, benefit, that shows
like you got to earn it, or whatever.
Like you want to, like the Todd Light Award or something, like, you know what I mean? Whatever.
Sure.
Because you'll find some great number 1s. That's cool. But
to not even have it available is silly. I don't know.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yep.
I think there's another one down there as well, Brian.
Yep.
From TJ Fallon. Thank you very much. Does Barnes play a little, or is it just a 3-man rotation at corner?
I don't know.
I don't know either. And he hasn't played, obviously, this year a whole lot.
Not much, yeah.
And I can't, as much as I would love to blame Brian Kelly, I don't know that he had a whole lot to do with who played and didn't play on defense.
I just think him being getting COVID and being out just kind of put him behind the 8 ball.
And that's fair.
I think it's really what it boils down to. Now, he got some special teams playing time, I believe, this year. I believe he did. I'm going to have to go look at that now. But, for me, I want to see the kid get a chance to compete. I don't know if he's going to play or not. Yeah, he got 14 special team snaps this year, played 3 games. So that's the other thing, too, is he's only played 3 games. So he could play in this game and still get the red shirt. That was actually what I was looking for, is how many games has he played? Because like Justin Walters has played 4 games this year. I doubt we're going to see him in the bowl game. I think those are the things you look at. Like you look down here and say, okay, Philip Riley, it says right here, how many games did he play in? He played 2 on special teams, trying to see how he did on defense. So I'm trying to find that here real quick. But, you got to make sure, too, that these kids aren't, these kids that have only played 3 games,
Absolutely.
You want to make sure that you're not putting them in a situation where
you can play 4, right?
As long as kids have played 4 games.
If you've already played 4, if he goes to 5.
Like Justin Walters, don't play him in this game and burn a year of eligibility.
Because that's just silly.
Right.
That's if it's the last game of the season, you really need him on special teams, then you do it. I mean, you do it to win a game. But for a bowl game, no, you take him aside and you're like, look, man, we're not playing you because we don't want to burn your year of eligibility. We want to keep that as a possibility for the future because you never know. Yes, this game's important, but it is not worth burning your eligibility. And you sit them down, you have that conversation. You know what I mean? You don't tease them and act like you might play them and then just don't. And that's your reasoning. You communicate. And I believe that Coach Mickens and Coach Freeman would do that. I mean, it's, I hope.
I want to pull this comment up from Benjamin Weiss. He says, I mostly agree. I believe confidence is gained through demonstrated ability. It's exactly what we're talking about. That's what competition is. When do you demonstrate that ability? It's when it's through competition, right? So you're saying confidence comes from demonstrated ability. Where is that happening? Where do you demonstrate that ability? It's when you are in competition against your teammates and your best teammates. So if you can say, hey, look, I've got an opening, I can beat Cam Hart, then I can beat anybody. Hey, I can cover Kevin Austin. I can cover anybody. That's what I'm talking about. That's where that competition comes from. When you have that success, when you go into competition and you gain confidence from that competition, it comes from because you've demonstrated the ability to be good, to make plays, to succeed. Then that comes into that's where that confidence comes from, and then that breeds to success on Saturdays. But the demonstrated ability doesn't happen on Saturdays because if you don't demonstrate it on Monday to Friday, you never get the chance to do it on Saturday. That's the thing. So we're saying the same thing. You're kind of going about it a different way, in my opinion.
Joe O'Connor says, is poor tackling a consequence of trying to strip the football all the time?
Sometimes, but that hasn't often been Notre Dame's problem this year. That was more a problem. I thought that was a problem last year. Was it last year or 2019? One of the last 2 years, they were doing this really weird. It was 2019. Remember Alohi Gilman was like trying to strip every time he's going for a tackle, he's trying to strip somebody. Yeah. They had this weird thing in 2019 where they were like trying to strip people all the time. I think it was 2019. Those 2 years kind of bleed together. But this year it hasn't been a problem. It's been poor angles, not wrapping up, going for big hits. It's just been weird stuff like that. Going too high. They try to tackle a little too high, or especially during the season. That also comes from being in a position where you're not really comfortable with where you're supposed to be. Those things tend to come through that. So that's kind of where I am on that.
Mark Stallman wants to know if Oklahoma State's rushing stats are inflated due to the Big 12 schedule.
No, because as we discussed yesterday, the Big 12 had more good defenses this year than it had good offenses.
That's true.
So yeah, I would say no. I would say it's not inflated. But again, see, this is the thing right here, though. I think there's a lot of folks, understandably, And I was this way until I really started to dive into Oklahoma State film, right? I didn't realize how well. Actually, no, I didn't. I didn't really realize it till I watched the Big 12 championship game. Like that was the most physical game played that day. And you're like, the big Oklahoma State and Baylor. I mean, 10 years ago, what would a championship game between Oklahoma and Baylor look like? It'd have been like 44-41, right? Been like Robert Griffin against Brandon Whedon, and it'd have been a high scoring game. Now it's two teams that run the football and play really physical, sound defense. So I think the Big 12 has changed. Now, will that be sustainable success? I don't know, but that's how it was at least for 2021. The best teams in that league played really good defense and ran the football. Again, Iowa State, obviously the success they had, you could argue they had the best running back in the Big 12. I mean, Breece Hall ran for almost 1,500 yards this year. I mean, so there were some. I'm looking at top 10 nationally, right? You had the number 6 running back in the country in total yards, and the number 8 and number 7 and number 8 running backs in the country in yards per game, or total yards, excuse me. No, I'm actually looking at yards per game. We're all Big 12 running backs. They had 3 top 10 national rushers in rushing. So I think this is a league that was a lot more physical, a lot more geared towards the run, which meant defenses were more geared to trying to stop the run, which meant Oklahoma had to play that. The reason I think Oklahoma's rush offense numbers were inflated, Mark, is because I think they had a couple big games that raised their overall number up that aren't indicative of what they actually are on defense. And that was kind of the point I was getting to about, when you point out, when you look at their numbers and you say, okay, they had several games where they didn't run the ball really well at all. I'm going to pull it up here again. They ran for 54 yards against Southwest Missouri State. They ran for 137 against Kansas State, 136 against Tulsa, 107 against Iowa State, 103 against West Virginia, 140 against Oklahoma, and 66 against Baylor, yet they still averaged 181 yards a game. Why? They had a 447-yard game against TCU. They had a 292-yard game against Kansas, who stinks. They had a 246-yard game against – so they were like here or here is kind of how they were. And so I feel like for them, Vince, it's kind of like what we said about – the opposite of what we said about Notre Dame's defense this year,
right,
where their rush defense was actually better than the numbers showed, because you had that one big game against Florida State that kind of raised up the whole average, where more often than not, they were pretty good. And I feel the opposite is true. Oklahoma State is they're not that great running the ball. Normally, they just have some big games and inflate it. Like, the game against TCU, that was against a defense that gives up 222 rushing yards a game. Kansas is a terrible rush defense. So I think they benefited from some of those games. I think that inflates it more so than it being Big 12 related, because I think you could find things like that with some other teams in other conferences as well. Really good question, Mark. Really good question.
Patrick Bird wants to know, what was Oklahoma State's scoring margin, wondering if they were involved in a lot of close games.
Oh, God, a ton of close games.
Yeah. Well, we know the Big 12 championship was a close game.
Well, and that was really their MO all year. I mean,
Yeah.
really, they didn't start blowing people out, honestly, Patrick, till November. So here's their margin of victories all season. And this will give you an idea. It's a great question. 7 points over Southwest Missouri State, 5 points over Tulsa, 1 point over Boise, 11 over Kansas State, 10 over Baylor, 8 over Texas, lost by 3 to Iowa State. So through their 6-0 start, their most convincing win was an 11-point win over Kansas State.
A lot of one
Right.
possession games.
And that changed after the loss. So then they lost to Iowa State by 3. Then after that, they won by 52 over Kansas,
Boom.
21 over West Virginia, 46 over TCU, 23 over Texas Tech, won 23-0. And then they only beat Oklahoma by 4, and then they lost to Baylor by 5. So they went through a sketch where they weren't playing very good teams, and they had success.
Sure.
And then when they started playing good teams again, it was back to close games. So I don't think Oklahoma State's a team that's generally going to blow people out.
Mm-hmm.
They play a lot of close games, but to me, that's indicative of that's what well-coached football teams do. They get into these close games, and at the end of the game, they figure out ways to win, and that's what Oklahoma State has done all year. I mean, look, I'm telling you right now, if Jalen Walton is not injured against Baylor, he does not get stopped at the 1-inch line.
Exactly.
Like
yeah,
the other
I
kid
agree with
does.
that
That was
too.
their third string running back. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because what would Notre Dame fans say if that happened to Notre Dame and Kyron Williams was out and it was, Logan Diggs or Chris Tyree? They say, oh, well, if Kyron's in the game,
Sebo
he scores.
or whoever. Yeah.
Right. Very close games, but that's what concerns me at Oklahoma State, because this is a really well-coached football team. They've come from behind a lot this year. There's several games you could point to say, boy, they should have lost that one, a lot like Notre Dame, right? Florida State and Toledo and Virginia Tech. And that's why I really like this Oklahoma State football team, because they're really
They've
sound.
Been through it.
They're really well coached. Yeah.
And that's
been there.
That's one of the marks of a really well coached team, is that you can win those close games. I mean, it just is. Michael Johnson, what wide receiver on I did it again. On Oklahoma State's offense should Notre Dame?
I'm just glad it's you now, not me.
Need to be worried about. I know, right? It's like you passed it on to me. So which wide receiver should they be worried about?
To me, it's we talked about this a little bit earlier, Michael. It's Tay Martin, because he's kind of their best guy, right? Like, he's got good size, he can get open, he can be a guy that can move the chains on third down.
He's the upperclassman, like he's the leader.
He's the only veteran.
Yeah.
The other guy for me that concerns me, and this is the guy, it's Jaden Bray. That's the guy that concerns me the most, because he's their big, tall, downfield. He averaged over 20 yards. He didn't catch I think he had like 16 catches. Let me look up his numbers here real quick. Jaden Bray had 12 catches. 12 catches for 241 yards, but he averaged 20 yards a catch. He's a guy that can stretch the field. He's 6'2", 6'3". He's a guy that can kind of win on big plays. He's the guy, to me, that I'd probably be most worried about. And they just don't have a lot of film on him. And guys like that always kind of make me a little nervous too, Vince, because it's like you're not used to seeing him as much. We're like the smaller slot guys. You know what they do. You know how they play. You know how Tate Martin plays. You've seen a ton of film of him. So I think those two guys, to me, Tay Martin and Jaden Bray, are the two guys that kind of make me the most nervous in this matchup. Absolutely.
Is anyone unavailable due to COVID?
We've got a couple questions like that.
Yeah.
As far as we know, I have not heard anything. Now, listen, Notre Dame won't announce that most likely till the day of the game. That's what they've done in the past. But every single time that's happened, we've gotten word of it beforehand.
Right.
And so we'll find out beforehand. So I don't see it being an issue. And my understanding is Notre Dame is only testing unvaccinated players or vaccinated players who are showing symptoms are the only ones, I believe, getting tested. Isn't that what Marcus Freeman said yesterday?
I didn't hear it.
So that's gonna. I'm curious, how does that change down in Arizona? Does the Bowls have a certain testing schedule? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. So that would be obviously a question mark. Are they just testing players to show symptoms as they should, or is it all the way around? That's something I'm unsure of at this time.
Hunter Land says, with Elston calling plays, so you think this is an audition, kind of like Tommy in 19, and what do you think the impact will be with him calling those plays? We kind of talked about the impact earlier. Is it an audition? A little one. I mean, it's part of the bigger picture, I would say.
I don't think it's intended to be, but it doesn't mean it isn't.
There you go. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah,
it's a really good way to put it. We have
another super chat from Joseph.
I was reading it. Thanks, Joseph. Appreciate it. He goes,
yes, that does make it easier.
Makes it
so much easier. Where we're from, we're Midwestern guys, right? Like, I grew up in Ohio. Vince grew up on a state that bordered Ohio. When we think OSU,
it's Ohio State.
But if you're in South Carolina, my understanding is if you're in the Carolinas and somebody says USC, you more often than not think South Carolina.
Good point.
But if you're anywhere else on the planet, you think of the real USC.
The real you. Look at you.
I mean, am I wrong?
Wow.
So anyway, back to Joseph's question.
Yes, it does help, Joseph. Thank you. Does Oklahoma State have any players who are opting out of the game? Do they have a couple guys in? They have a couple guys in the portal?
That's the interesting thing,
because they're still on the depth chart. From what I understand,
and the depth chart came out after those guys announced they were going to the portal. So like Tanner McAllister, their starting safety, announced he's in the portal, and Jaden Jernigan, a D tackle, But according to Gundy and according to the depth chart, they're going to play, which is so weird to me.
It's weird.
And my question is, my question would be like, are you really like, okay, Notre Dame's like Shane Simon's at the game, right? So like Shane Simon's being treated differently than like Kyle Hamilton or
and
Kyron Williams.
Litchfield Adjavon
same thing,
was practicing. I assume he's at the game, but he was at practice. Yeah,
he announced in the portal. So the whole thing is strange. Like, okay, I'm leaving, but I'm going to see it through. Well, when it was the NFL guys. But it's like, but the transfer guys have still committed to playing and being around the team.
Yeah, right.
And it's a little different. I mean, it's so weird. But yes, somebody asked, can you play in the game and be in the portal? Yes, the portal doesn't disassociate you from the program.
Right.
Now, Notre Dame can choose to disassociate a guy from the program if he enters the portal. But you don't have to be. And it's clear from what we're seeing that Notre Dame and other teams are guys that go in the portal, they're still during the bowl season, they're still allowing them to be part of what they're doing, which is really strange to me and hard for me to fathom just because it just is such a new thing. And that was never an issue for when I played or when, things like that. Like, my freshman year, I got hurt. I started the first 6 games of the season, got hurt. And I told my coach with 2 games left that I was going to transfer. I just wanted him to be honest with him and let him know, like, you're out there recruiting, and he wouldn't let me be around the team the rest of the year. I had no problem. I understood. I completely got it. I mean, I told you I'm leaving the program. I understand it. So I actually think it's kind of cool, like especially for a guy like Shane Simon who's not playing. Shane hasn't done anything wrong. He's not going to be invited back next year. Shane couldn't come back even if he wanted to, in my understanding. So, of course, he's got to go in the portal. He needs to let teams know because the semester is going to start at some schools in 2 weeks.
Absolutely. Yep.
These kids have to. But you don't punish them because of the timing of it. And I like the fact that they're doing that. It's just weird to me, because it is so new. So yeah, it's strange. But apparently, those kids from Oklahoma State are going to play. That's the latest I've heard. It's very strange.
And if you another interesting piece of this, there's an app for the Fiesta Bowl that you can download for the media and everything, and there's different things you can go to. And there's a link to the Notre Dame roster, and you go to the Notre Dame roster, and guess who's not even on the roster? Kyle Hamilton and Kyron Williams.
Yeah,
like there's no number 14, and there's
because
no
they chose not to play.
Right.
It sounds like these other kids still want to play.
Yeah,
it's very strange.
It is very strange. I agree.
So
with
weird.
You.
And D-Rock said the same thing. Wasn't Florida's quarterback? He's talking about Emory Jones. Like, that was so weird when I turned on the UCF Florida game. I was like, wait a minute, isn't Emory Jones in the transfer portal?
Right.
He is. And he's still starting a quarterback for Florida. The whole thing is freaking weird to me. I absolutely freaking hate it. But I don't know if there's a lot they can do about it because a lot of these kids, they're like Lawrence Keys, for example, Shane Simon, for example. Those kids are graduated, which means they can go practice somewhere in the spring. That means they have to figure out where they're going before the spring semester starts. The timing of it sucks, but it is what it is. And I don't know if there's a lot you can do about it. It's just the whole thing, like I said, is just really weird. Just really weird. Mark Stallman said this, Dr. Pepper nailed the portal. Did you see that commercial?
It's hilarious.
Okay.
Hey, you guys need a punter?
I have yet to see a bad Dr. Pepper Fansville commercial. They have done so well with even the one that they were doing mocking themselves. Did you see that one, the Christmas one?
Oh,
it's not like we're
what happens in the off season? What do you mean?
It's not like we're some fake town or something like that to promote a product or something. It was so good. And Brian Bosworth, the resurrection of his career, like he now does commercials in Christian movies. Think about that.
Does he really?
Yes, he's in a lot of Christian movies. Yeah, he's been in a series called Resurrection Road, which my wife and I have watched, which is really Revelation Road is what I think it's called. Really, I enjoyed it. It's kind of cheesy, but he's been in several Christian movies we've watched, and then he does commercials. But if you think about who he was in college and in the NFL and the movies he was first in,
there's one on right now. I'm watching him right now on ESPN.
It's how his life, how he's changed his life, and I thought the 30 for 30 that they did on him was phenomenal. Like just the regret he has. Like, did you see when he was talking to son? He's like, yeah, that's not something I'm proud of.
Right.
Like his son was holding up that communism thing that and NCA, and he's like, and you could see just the disappointment on his face of like, that's what my son's like. That's the example I set. it was such a cool moment. It really was. Just watching him, just seeing the evolution of like, hey, look, son, don't make the same dumb mistakes I did.
Yeah.
Don't miss on an opportunity. He missed out on an opportunity, and you could see it. He missed on that chance to play with his brothers one last time because of dumb decisions he made. And you don't realize it at the time, but then you realize it later and you're like, man, I wish I would have. And that's why I say with this transfer thing, that's what's going to happen. A lot of these kids are going to look back and say, man, I wish I wouldn't have done this. And that's what is so nice about the old school transfer system, even though it had its own problems, is you knew you had to sit out a year. So you had to really be thought. You didn't make emotional decisions very often when that was the case. That's just the reality of it.
Absolutely. And we kind of touched on this earlier, but I'm going to bring it up. It says, what would the benefit of having Josh Lugg come back for another year? I just don't see it. And there's a bunch of people out there saying you absolutely have him come back. I just don't get it.
I don't know who's saying that. It's like, oh, it's competition. Like, look, the reality is,
why would you come back to potentially sit the bench? Like,
here's the thing. People, I often think, misunderstand competitions. Competition's important. You have to have competition.
100%,
I think if you don't have competition, then you're not doing this right. But you also have to understand that the more players you have in the competition means the fewer reps that each of those players are getting. And so, do I want a quarterback competition at Notre Dame? Yeah, I do. Between Tyler Buckner and Drew Pine, because I don't want a third guy in that competition, because then none of them are going to get the reps they need to really develop their game and become the guy. Same thing in offensive tackle. You need Tosh Baker and Blake Fisher and Joe Alt and whoever else you're going to have a tackle getting as many reps as possible. You know who Josh Lugg is. You do.
Yeah.
And with his injuries especially, like, you don't just bring him back for depth. You have 18 scholarship offensive linemen right now with eligibility coming back. You don't need 18 offensive linemen. If he doesn't come back, you're down to 17. And I'm not counting Kane Madden. I'm talking about guys that have eligibility to come back. You don't need that many offensive linemen. You could lose 5-6 guys from that group, and you're still fine from a number standpoint. It's about developing the younger players and the more talented players is the key. And when you bring him back, I think it's one of those things that you're now taking away the ability to develop Tosh Baker, Blake Fisher, Joe Alt, those guys, and Emil Wagner, Ty Chan, and you can't miss those.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. There's one from UIW Swimmer I wanted to put out there. He says, what's the schedule for the rest of the week? We are finalizing that pretty much at the end of the show. And we will let everybody know what that is going to be, just because Brian's traveling tomorrow. I'm traveling on Thursday. There's just stuff going on. We want to make sure that we have that hammered out. So we will let you know ASAP.
We will probably have a recorded show for tomorrow. So we'll put a recorded show up around noon. And Thursday, we're planning on having a live show, but we're just not sure because Vince is going to be we're just not sure how all that's going to play out.
We're trying to work out the kinks. And again,
we're going to try to do a night show one of the days this week. We have a night show. We won't go live when Peyton Bowen commits, but we may have a video that comes out right afterwards. Let you know what we think about whatever decision he makes. Is. And so we'll have a lot. We'll have a lot. We're just not quite sure when and what and all that kind of stuff. So that's why you need to hit the notification bell.
That's right.
Is whether we whether we schedule a live show or whether we, record something and put it out, you'll know. And the reason there's some uncertainty is because we're kind of beholden to the quality of the internet when we get to wherever we get to.
No doubt about it.
So, but we're going to try.
Hotspot. I've got a mobile hotspot I'm going to bring just in case. So we'll see. Hopefully have technology will travel. We do have a super chat here, Brian, that we got to get to from Alan. He says, which one of our young running backs is suited better against Oklahoma State?
All of them.
I think they balance each other
reasons,
out very nicely. To be honest with you, because of the three guys that are going to play in this game, all three bring something different to the table. And so I feel like there's going to be a nice balance there. I don't think anyone, is suited better than the other one. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, they bring different things. Like I think Logan brings some of the make you miss, sort of that, churn out that, 4 yards, make a guy miss in the backfield and get
I
4
think he's
yards.
the closest to Kyron Williams.
Yeah.
On
I would agree.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Chris Tyree's the guy that maybe doesn't carry it 15, 20 times, but you need to get 7, 8, 9 touches just because he can be the home run threat. It's just the key for me is how they use them, how they develop them, not develop them, but how they develop a game plan around them, around their skill sets. Those are the things that to me are going to determine success, because I think they all fit well against. I mean, because like Logan is that guy that could a D tackle comes free and he can make the guy miss and pick up 2, 3, 4 yards. I was talking about Tyree's that guy that if you just give him a little crease, he's going to hit that sucker and it's it's out of here. And so those are the things that I want to see from this game. Don't ask any of them to be like Kyron though. Figure out what they do best and then build around. And then I'd bring in Audric just as a change up and just hammer him. Like, okay, like I would honestly go Chris Tyree on a series. I'd run him like on a reverse. I'd run like 2, 3 outside zones. I'd get him a screen. And then I'd come back that next series after Chris did that. And I'd run Audric Estime right down their friggin' throat. Just to like, absolutely. And then I'm bringing Logan back the next series. Then I might just go diamond formation. Tommy, please. With I got Logan and Audric and then Chris Tyree behind me.
Yeah, right.
I mean, just this is what's fun about bowl games. You know what I mean? Just have some fun with it. Those are things I want to see.
Yep.
So that that's
I think that's kind of where we're at there, Ryan.
Yeah.
Based on what I see over to the side, so I see you're stiff arming some people in the chat. I like that.
Some people want to come in and act like children, and we're going to treat them as such. So we get put in timeout, and we move on, and grown-ups get back to talking football.
I love it.
It is what it is. It is what it is.
I gathered about what he was talking about based on some of the responses.
Yeah,
so
it's
a deserved timeout.
Okay. It is. Matt, 2011 GT, any chance Lawrence Keys comes back? That is not something that I believe is in the works. There has been no conversation, as far as I know, between Notre Dame and Lawrence Keys into coming back. So I think that ship has sailed. Now, could things change over the next week? Sure.
But yeah. I'm more curious as to if Lawrence Keys stays with his commitment to Tulane or if he goes to Georgia Tech.
I believe he is. Yeah, no, he's not going to Georgia Tech.
Well, I didn't know if he was going to follow Chip Long. Yeah, okay.
No.
Fair enough.
He didn't necessarily follow Chip Long to Tulane. It just made that Tulane decision easier. He's from New Orleans, and Tulane's in New Orleans.
Of course.
So that's what it was more about that. And but from what I understand, even with Chip gone, the Tulane coaches definitely want him, and so that right now is the plan for Lawrence Keys.
Gotcha.
So I think that is going to do it. Vince, you want to take us out of here?
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on another edition of this Irish Breakdown podcast. Remember, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, all of those fun things. If you're listening to us on a podcast, make sure you subscribe and give us a 5-star review. We always appreciate that. And, again, Irish Breakdown, the boards. Hit the, subscribe to the boards. There's always
so much growth. It's been so amazing. We have tons of conversation. It's been a blast.
It's been a lot of fun being on the boards. I've had some more time to get on there, since I'm on break as well. And the boards is the place to be. So make sure you get on there. The intel that Brian provides, and I'm not just saying this because he may or may not write me a check at the end of every month. The intel is top notch. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say. And I do believe it. So make sure you get on the boards and subscribe. It's a fun place to be. So everybody out there, we will have shows the rest of the week.
Vince is saying he can be bought, but in this instance, he's not.
That's right. That's all I'm saying. So make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when we're going to drop some videos, because we will have videos of some sort up every day leading up to the Fiesta Bowl. So make sure you check all that out. So for Brian, I'm Vince, and we will see you next time on the Irish Breakdown podcast.
Yes, Katie, to your first part, I do think we'll see that in this game.
I do too.
So she got it in just in time.
Just in the nick of time.
Just in time. Well done, Katie. Well done.
Well played.
Right. Take care, everybody.